The next quick performance win I want to show in Laravel is the route cache. Now, routing in any PHP application is almost always a slow process. And there's two parts to this. First, there's route registration, in other words, telling the application what routes are available. And two is matching any request received by the application to the correct route, whether that's a web request or something like an artisan command. Now, the route cache does the first part of that, faster route registration. And what this does is that it caches all of your routes so that Laravel doesn't have to recalculate every route and see how to run it and see what class it's mapped to, along with those dependencies, on every web request. So this speeds up the web request a lot because that's a slow process as well. So if we just run php artisan route cache, it's going to create a new file, but we are going to run into an error first. Unable to prepare route API user for serialization because it uses a closure. And this is one limitation of the route cache. You can't use closures in your routes. So on my default application here in PHP Storm, I have a few things going on there for routes in the API one and the web one. So I'm actually just going to comment these out, but what you should normally do is set these to be used in a controller. So some controller, and we'll set that to some method. So if you just switch these to a controller instead of a closure, you'll be all set. You can use the route cache. For now, I'm just going to comment this out. I'll go to the web route and we'll see the same thing here. The default route for the home page is using a closure. You can set that to a controller, but for now, I'll just comment that out. I'll head back here and we should be able to run this now. So php artisan route cache. Route cache is cleared, so cleared out any old one, and then it recreated a cache, so its routes are cached successfully. And inside of Laravel, we'll see back in the Bootstrap cache directory, we see a routes file here. So we created the services one in the last video. The routes one is now created newly here as well. This is a serialized PHP string. It's base 64 encoded, and then it just gets unencoded and unserialized, and those routes are set. So let's actually see what kind of data this is saving here. Do php artisan tinker. I'm going to output all of our serialized route information, and we get a route collection class. So I'm actually going to DD that out so we get a dump of that unserialized route collection class. And what we can see here is that it has all of these parsed routes. It has the action list, the route, the names of the routes. So for instance, any middleware it uses, the controller and method it uses, the namespace, prefix, where, any of the route stuff that we assign to it. It's all pre-compiled already, so we don't have to recalculate that in every web request. We can even see in my application that the debug bar has its own set of controllers that we don't really see loaded by ourselves in the routes file, right? These are actually loaded through the service provider for that. And that's another source of routes, somewhere we don't necessarily know are even created here, like the debug bar, which you should only use in development, has its own routes that are used as well. So this is a great time saver and performance optimization that you can make in Laravel because the compiling of all the routes and the information around them is an expensive operation on every web request. So here we have this compiled and saved in a format that's easier to read and has a lot of information that's already been calculated by Laravel. Now, this means that if you go back and edit your routes, the changes won't take effect until you clear the cache or reset the cache. So basically, in development, don't use this. If you want to reset it, you can just delete the routes file yourself, and it's as simple as that. It'll start using your API, your web, and any other routes that you have defined as well. And just for good measure, let's see the route cache command file. We'll see it creates a route cache file for faster route registration, and all it's basically doing is get the application routes, get fresh application routes. In other words, don't grab from a cache. And it basically serializes them and saves them to the file. So as simple as that. So this is definitely one to add to your production deployment scripts as well. So far in this series, we have a few things that's good to do on a production deployment. Let's actually just make a quick bash script here and see what that looks like so far. So I'm going to do deploy.sh. I'm not going to go to the intricacies of deploying a Laravel application. There's a lot of stuff to it, but let's just pretend that we'll do something like git pull origin master, so we have the latest code, and then composer install, so we have the latest dependencies. Now, as we said, this will actually run the php artisan optimize command, so you don't need to define that here, but we could do it as well. And then we can do php artisan route cache to clear out our old cache of the routes if it exists, and then recreate a new cache. Now, the very last thing I want to mention here, there's a new update for Symfony 3.3, which has faster routing. Now, this is not the part of Symfony that calculates your routes. That's actually a Laravel specific thing. So the command that we're optimizing here, the stuff we're caching, is all about calculating the available routes that you have defined and all that good stuff. The second part of that is matching a request into your application to the routes. And that is something that Symfony handles. And in Symfony 3.3, which is going to be used in Laravel 5.5, that'll actually be a little bit faster. And you can see the details about that if you find this article, which I'll link to the notes for this video as well.